Welcome in, fans, to the Utah Lax Report. I'm your host, Tim Haslam. This episode of the podcast features Timpview head coach Taylor Redd. We talked to Taylor about coaching at Timpview and also when he coached at BYU. Taylor also played at BYU, and we talk about him growing up in Michigan, spending some time in Texas, and also being from Virginia. We also talk about the RPI. Coach Redd is a data analyst for Adobe during his day job, so he kind of does this for a living, which is exciting. So hope you give it a listen, hope you enjoy. As always, the Utah Lax Report podcast is sponsored by GroupSpot. Whether you're an organized high school team, a casual group of friends playing pickup, or a fully supported booster club, GroupSpot brings the team together like never before. Elevate your game and get to the finish ahead of the competition with GroupSpot. You can learn more about GroupSpot at groupspot.app/sports-teams.
Welcome to the show, Coach. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. For those listening, honestly, this has been a long time coming, Coach. I think, it took Good Friday and neither of us working to make this work.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this since maybe since last year when we started some of our conversations about RPI and some other things, but kind of been talking about this, and then we've been trying to schedule it for at least the last 3 or 4 weeks at least. So glad to be here.
You're in season. You've got a bunch of games and practices, and you're responsible for young adults, which is awesome. I'm not responsible for young adults at the moment, but I am also busy going to games and
going to a lot of games. Going to more games than I do, I think. Probably
lots of
games a week. Yeah.
I am hitting multiple games a week. I'm actually heading down your way to the Payson-Layton game today. And
oh, nice.
It should be fun. I'm really excited about it. One reason for that is after this game, I will have gone to the northernmost team, which is Skyview, and the easternmost team, which is Wasatch. And now this will be the southernmost team.
Wow, you're hitting all the corners. What's the furthest west team? Do you know?
The furthest west team. So in the Salt Lake Valley, the furthest west is Copper Hills, and I've actually been there this year. But if you look at Google Maps and kind of draw a line, you're going to get then into Westlake, like Syracuse.
Syracuse.
Westlake. No, it could be Westlake.
Yeah.
I'll need to rethink that because I forgot about them. And is Cedar Valley? Cedar Valley or West?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some work to do on the furthest west team.
I stumped you already. I mean, usually you're like on top of everything, and there's no way I can
stump you. But well, that's the thing is like Skyview's easy, Payson's easy, Wasatch is easy. But yeah, when you start talking about that west border, it can get a little complicated.
A little bit tricky.
That's right. Let's start with the first question that I ask all the guests that come on. And when and where did you start playing lacrosse?
Yeah, I started playing lacrosse. I should have thought about this before you asked the question because I knew it was coming. I was in 5th grade, so that would have, without maybe disclosing my age, but that was 96-ish, somewhere around there, 97-ish. So I started playing in Northern Virginia. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so I started playing there. I was introduced to it by a couple of friends, the Gerard brothers, who played at BYU both for 1 year, but they played since they were, I don't know, 1st grade or something. And I had always wanted to play with them, and took me some convincing to get my parents to let me play, but finally convinced them. And I started playing. I think the first official season was 97, and then have been playing and coaching since then. So it's been a long run.
Sure. And you started playing, at that young age. I'm assuming you played, through middle school and high school. What was the name of your high school?
So it's interesting. So I grew up in Northern Virginia all the way up until I was in high school. My freshman year, we moved to Michigan. So the high school I went to was called Eisenhower High School in Shelby Township, Michigan. The high school I would have gone to in Virginia is Broad Run. And then my family moved back, and I would have gone to Langley had I been at high school in Virginia. But so it kind of bounced around. But the high school I actually went to is Eisenhower High School, the Eagles, home of the Eagles.
There you go. And I talked to Jordan Hyde for the Utah Lacrosse podcast, and he was from Michigan as well. And he said it was just exploding. Now he's a little younger. What was the lacrosse scene like in Michigan when you were playing?
Yeah, it was I would not say it was exploding. It was starting to this avalanche was starting. It was starting to like pick up a little bit, but it was still pretty raw. There was obviously 2 really good teams when I was playing. Brother Rice, which was a Catholic private school. I guess maybe 3. Cranbrook, which is another private school, and then Birmingham Seaholm, which was a school about 40 minutes away. those three were the kind of dominant high schools. And then everyone else was just trying to like field a team. Usually it was multiple high schools banding together to make a team, but there's a couple high schools that were solid. So Troy, Athens, and Troy had some solid teams. And so there's a couple of places that had solid teams, but it was very much in the growth stages, very similar to like where Utah was about, I don't know, 20-ish years ago when I came to BYU for the first time, but maybe a little bit further ahead than Utah at that point. But yeah, about like that.
And as you talk about, playing in high school, when did you know or maybe want to start exploring playing lacrosse in college?
Yeah, it's a great question. I honestly, I fell in love with lacrosse before I even signed up for a team. Like I said, I was begging my parents to play. I just thought it was the coolest thing. In fact, I I remember in art class in like fourth grade, before I even started playing, I drew a lacrosse goal, and I actually drew it like upside down with a triangle facing up, because in my friend's backyard, that's how we always would play on it. But I was just obsessed with it. But honestly, didn't think I was gonna like play collegiately for sure until like my senior year. So I went to a ton of the BYU camps. I was actually trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And for school the next year, BYU was a little bit on my radar, but not really. I really wanted to go to either UVA, Virginia Tech, or Princeton. Were kind of the three schools I really wanted to go to. I didn't think I was good enough to play at UVA or Princeton for sort of obvious reasons. But yeah, I went to the BYU camps, and Coach Lamb called me up probably September of my senior year and was like, "Hey, we like loved having you at camp. Was really looking forward for you to come in here and hoping you can try out." And he was probably just doing it as a courtesy, like probably talking to a lot of guys, but that was the first time I was like, oh man, I would love to play in college. That's like my dream. I just didn't know that was really like an option. And so that really put BYU at the top of my list of places where I wanted to go, and I was fortunate enough to get in and play at BYU under a great coach.
And you played there in your words, not mine, random years. In 2005, 2006, then 2008 and 2010. Talk about just your lacrosse experience in general at BYU.
Oh man, it couldn't have been a better experience. Unbelievable guys there, great coaches. As a whole, it was an awesome experience. I played in 05 and 06, and in a lot of ways, they won the national championship in 07. So I missed this national championship. I went on a church mission. Before I even went, I had hurt my ankle, and I ended up needing to get surgery. So came home to get surgery and had that fixed. But I was 1 year away from having, being on the national championship team. Then ended up playing in 2008. 2009, I got really busy with school, really started focusing on like career and what I wanted to do long term. And it got a little bit too busy. I was graduating that year, so I didn't play in 2009. And then I got into graduate school at BYU. So I decided to play one final year, played at BYU in 2010. And then obviously they won the championship in 2011. So I was like right next to two championship years. And I joke with some of the guys I played with that I was like, maybe this is sacrilegious to say, but the John the Baptist of BYU lacrosse. I was there to usher it in, but wasn't there when it actually happened. So, but yeah, I missed it by 2 years, but like I had an amazing experience, and honestly, winning a national championship would have been the cherry on top, but I don't really think it took anything away from my experience, the guys that I met there, the things that I learned there. And really those are things that I think are way more valuable and important than the championship. So it was a bummer to miss those, but couldn't have asked for a better experience.
And as we talk about those years at BYU, is there a certain game or maybe a certain rival that comes to mind when you think about that time?
Yeah, there's some really, really good ones. I mean, CSU always has like I hate CSU. I mean, I actually have met some people from there since then. They're all great people, but we had pretty intense rivalries with CSU. And the other one that maybe more of a personal one, but Michigan, especially, my first 2 years, Michigan hadn't had that huge run of undefeated for I don't know how long, but coming from Michigan, kind of knowing some of the guys there and kind of knowing some of that back history, I always like looked forward to that game. And that was one that I was circled because a lot of my friends knew guys that played at Michigan, or, I knew some of them, and, there's always that like wanted to show them up a little bit. So those are the two that I probably circled on my calendar the most. Later on, CU kind of dominated CSU, and CU kind of became, Colorado became kind of the I don't know, bigger rivalry. But for most of my time, CSU and Michigan were the two big ones.
And as you graduate from BYU, I'm assuming you go and get a normal job and start working. What sort of path did you take after graduation?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I graduated my undergrad and then went straight into a master's program, like I think I kind of mentioned earlier, and played one more year at BYU, and then I had one more year of the master's program. During that second year, I actually started coaching because that was always like my dream and my passion. In high school and most of college, I wanted to be a math ed major, teach high school math or physics, and then start coaching along with that. But during school, I kind of pivoted a little bit and kind of went down this data science approach. And so started coaching while I was still finishing grad school. Once I finished grad school, I got a job at a marketing company in Lehigh, just doing data science and data analytics. I was there for just a short amount of time, for about 9 months or a year. And then I got a job in Austin, Texas, and I moved down there to work with a really small startup company down in Austin. And since then, I've kind of bounced around and now work at Adobe in Lehigh as a data scientist.
And we'll talk about that part a little bit coming up here, because it ties in a little bit with another part of the discussion that I want to have about the RPI. But
yeah,
while you're in Texas, did you do any coaching down there?
Yeah, so I started coaching. I mean, maybe back up a little bit. I started coaching while I was in grad school up at Bingham High School. Coached with Marshall Kay, who, some people who've been around the sport for a long time will know that name. Learned a ton. I was actually roommates with Marshall at BYU. So I coached at Bingham for 2 years, learned a ton from Marshall. I learned a ton of BYU, learned a ton more from Marshall, coaching with him. And then I moved down to Austin and for a job, and just happened to get put in touch with a guy named Noah Fink, who is a pretty big one of the adrenaline guys, and he runs a lot of stuff for adrenaline, and just was lucky enough to get hooked up with him and coached at a pretty small private school down in Austin. And so that was a really fun experience, and so that was a really fun experience to kind of coach at that level and coach on there, and coach with someone who's totally different coaching tree than most of the guys that I had kind of come up with, and learned, again, a ton of stuff that I had never been exposed to about, especially offensively, some really good stuff from Noah. He's really, really smart, really knows the game, been around it for a long time. So I was down there for about 2 years and had a really good experience down there. And
the MCLA tournament is going to be in Austin this year. Well, technically Round Rock, right?
Yeah. And I would love to go down there for it. I don't know if our season will align and let me go down there, but Austin is like my favorite city, probably in the world. Not that I've done a ton of world traveling, but enough to know that it's up there. The food and music scene is hard to beat down in Austin.
It's a great place. I've been there once. I'm actually heading to the MCLA tournament, so I'm excited to go back. Should be a great time. Should be a great tournament. A couple Utah teams will likely feature well there. After Texas, though, you come back to Utah, like you mentioned, to work at Adobe. And at that time, you go and coach at Timpview, and then at BYU for 2 years, and now back at Timpview. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So I was at Timpview for 2 years, coached with actually Jordan Harris, who I think you've maybe mentioned earlier in the podcast, Johnny Jackson, and another one of our friends, Jeremy Reif. So we coached all there together. Johnny was the head coach, and Jordan and I kind of coached the defense, Jeremy with the offense. And then they all left me high and dry. I took over as the head coach, or maybe that's why they left, is because I took over as the head coach. I'm not really sure. But was there for a year, then went to BYU as a defensive coordinator with Jordan in 2017, and then took over and was the offensive coordinator in 18, and then decided to come back to Timpview to kind of, I don't know, run my own show, I guess.
Yeah, and that's certainly something to be said, right? Different coaches thrive in different environments, and sort of being at the helm is definitely an aspect to consider. Let's talk about this current Timpview team. I've seen you guys now twice, aside for a quarter up at Highland, and then this past week we did the Game Night Live broadcast with your overtime unfortunately lost to Skyline.
Yeah.
there were some great plays by both teams, and it was just a fun back and forth game. Talk to us about this team, though. Tell us, to the average fan, maybe what's something that stands out to you as their coach, and maybe something to describe how they're playing and how they're coming together.
Yeah. So this team's, it's fun. We're a young team, super young. I think we had 18 seniors last year. Most of them were full-time starters. And so coming into this year, I honestly did not know really what to expect from our guys. But they've stepped up and sort of rose to the occasion. Charlie Friedman's, is a guy who's started on varsity, I think, all 4 years, and obviously is really like a heartbeat to a lot of what we do. And it kind of starts with him. And I knew he'd be great because he was great last year and he was great the year before. But outside of Charlie, it was a little bit of question marks. We had two really, really talented midfielders, but they were on our second line last year, Finbar Williams and Aiden Rawl. And like, I knew they'd bring it and they would rise up. But outside of that was, a lot of question marks. Those were like the only three consistent contributors on varsity last year. We had another senior defenseman, McKay, who played some varsity last year and but didn't have a ton of starting experience on varsity. So, we didn't know what to expect, but we were playing, I think, at a way higher level than I was sort of expecting. Goalie was another, I don't want to go through every position, but goalie was another question mark we had. Our goalie's been playing lacrosse for 13 months, just over a year, and is an absolute monster of a kid, great leader and great lacrosse player, but even better person. So, and then he's young, he's a sophomore, and then we have two really young Poles, a freshman and a sophomore. So we have a ton of really young guys. And I have to keep reminding myself that because we play so well at times, and there's times where we're like, I don't know what we're doing. I have to remind myself we're still really, really young. We're still learning how to play at the speed and at the pace that I sort of demand from them, which is not a small feat. I can be, fairly demanding on like kind of the expectations I have for the guys, but to their credit, they have gone way above and beyond what I could have expected. So it's been a fun team. Like I said, we're still learning, we're still growing, we're still trying to figure out who we are and what our strengths and weaknesses are. But I think we're coming into our own as we kind of head into the back half of the season.
And you talk about that back half of the season. I've got the schedule up here now. Mainly region games. You still got Jordan, Lehigh, Alta, Timpanogos, Mountain View, Orem. So basically restarting the region, and then one glaring game at the very end of the season, Coach. That's a Thursday, May 12th, against Park City.
Yeah. So we have. I would say we have two big. All of our games are big, but the two that we kind of are, or at least I'm focusing on, and thinking about is the Alta game. Obviously, they kicked our trash, and hats off to them. They're a great team. They play fast and they're impressive. So we want to have the opportunity to play them again and to kind of see where we've grown and where we've improved. And then obviously, that Park City game's, our last game of the year. And I did that sort of on purpose. I thought last year we had a region schedule that I didn't think prepared us for the playoffs as well. And I think it kind of showed in our first round defeat. So I really wanted to have a tough game that really prepared us for what the playoffs are going to be like. And obviously picked a Park City team who's, notoriously a great program, and really excited to play those guys at sort of the tail end of the season.
You're right. Those are all great points. Alta definitely the sort of the favorite in your region, and then Park City probably one of the favorites in all of 5A.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see what happens to them as the season goes on. They've got to obviously play Olympus, which will be a great game. Though, thinking about your team and sort of your program, what are some of the things, some guys have pillars, some have mottos, some have like non-negotiables. What are some of your team sort of bonding or culture type things that you guys employ?
Yeah. So some of the things that, we talk about a lot is like, we got to play fast. And that's one of the things that I like tell the guys like every day is we got to play fast. We expect to play faster than any other team that we play against. Obviously that we play some great teams. I'm not saying we're always the fastest, but that's our expectation, is that we're going to play faster and more physical than other teams. And to do that, we spend a ton of time in the weight room. We lift year round. We lift during the season, twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week during the season. because I think it's such a it's so important to be physically ready to play sort of the style that we play. So that's a big one. And along with that, I tell the guys like attack. If you're ever in doubt, go like attack something, attack a ground ball, attack the offense, be aggressive on defense. If we make mistakes, we'll figure it out later. We'll fine tune it. We'll get better, but we got to be like in that mindset of like attack. And then obviously with that though, you kind of have to, there's the other side of that, if you're attacking all the time, you're going to give up some stuff. You're going to have moments where you make a mistake, moments where you give up a goal or, have a turnover. And, I try to really like hound the guys, I want you to take chances. And if we make mistakes, but that's how you learn. And so those are the kind of three things that like we harp on a lot and we talk about a lot. And I think those are kind of what we pride ourselves on. If you talk about pillars, those are kind of the things that I hope every game the other team thinks, man, that team plays fast. If they do that, if they think that, then I feel like we've accomplished, what I want us to do. Whether we win or lose, that sort of takes care of itself. If we just fly around the field, that's really what I'm concerned about the most.
And as you think about, your team moving forward, do you see yourself, where do you see the program in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, man, I'm excited about where the program is going in 3 to 5 years. We have obviously some great seniors. I mentioned Charlie. We all have some other guys, McKay I mentioned, and Finn Jackson, and I could go through. I think we have like 6 or 7. We have some twins that are awesome, and so we have some guys that'll be leaving this year, and they'll be hard to replace. But our core is really, really young. And so in 3 to 5 years, we're going to have some guys that are going to be absolute studs. James Bauer is a freshman a freshman attackman who was awesome, has, been awesome all year, but I think really in the last 2 or 3 games really turned it on. And then we have another freshman, Grant Rice, who's one of our best defenders, and it's going to be really fun to see him kind of grow and develop into, I think, one of the top defenders in the state. So, we're still young. We still are a building program. I don't like our youth program is not quite to the same tier as some of these other top tier programs, but we have a lot of really good core. And so I think in 3 years, I'm excited to see where we're at, because we have some great foundational pieces in place.
And is Charlie Friedman the last of the Friedmans, or are there more?
He's the last. So they have a daughter. I don't think she's planning on playing at least boys lacrosse. I actually should probably check with her. She lives in my neighborhood, so I should know that. But it's the last of the Friedman, of the Bill Friedman's line, which I would be remiss if I didn't mention Bill and how much he's done for the Timpview program. And I mean, he's been, if there was a godfather of Timpview lacrosse, it would be Bill. So he's been a big part of the program, and obviously his 3 sons have been a big part.
And it's funny you use that term, because Pete Stevenson would call Charlie the older Charlie Friedman, Bill's brother, the godfather of East lacrosse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys played each other at the beginning of the season.
We did, and that was an epic game. It was, we joked that it was the Friedman Bowl, and it did not disappoint. I mean, obviously we came out on top of that, so it feels a little bit better for us. But Charlie, I think, had 10 points or something crazy. I didn't even notice. I knew he was playing well, and then look at the stat sheet at the end of the game, and he dominated, and he was a huge reason why we were able to pull that 1-goal victory out.
Let's switch gears and talk about something that's still related. We've talked a little bit about you being a data scientist at Adobe. First of all, what does that mean, Coach? Like,
oh man,
the title sounds cool.
Yeah.
Like, what do you actually do at work?
Yeah, science data. I don't know how to make it more clear. No, I don't know. If you figure it out, let me know. But it's a little bit data analyst, analyzing a lot of data, especially big data, a little bit of programming and building statistical models and putting that into production code. It's a little bit about answering business questions. So kind of those 3 things all rolled up into one role, I guess. But it's it's a pretty loosely used term, and it can mean a lot of different things. But essentially, those are the 3 things that I kind of focus on in my day-to-day boring job.
And are you doing that for clients of Adobe, or are you doing that internally, or both?
Yeah, I've actually done both. I started as working with Adobe for their clients and helping them analyze data. And now I've kind of switched to internal. And I'm happy to go into any details you want, but it's pretty boring. But I work with our marketing department and I analyze web traffic data to give insights into how the market's performing, how the sort of global e-commerce market is performing.
I am very interested in that kind of thing. I don't know that our listeners would be, so maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Most people aren't.
Right. No, it actually is probably pretty fascinating. But as part of that, obviously you're great with spreadsheets and looking at a lot of numbers and pulling data from websites and all this stuff. And so that's lended yourself to kind of feed your other hobby of lacrosse. And those two kind of have been married, and you've created your own RPI.
Yeah.
Not
RPI, but yeah, I mean, a ranking system. Yeah.
And right. And
well, I guess I also, last year I worked on trying to replicate the RPI that Max Preps comes up with. So I guess in that case I've done both, but yeah, I have a ranking system that I came up with and use.
And it's called the Red Rankings, and you are active on Twitter. It's for the MCLA, so the league that BYU, UVU play in, and basically you take all the data and kind of sort of create your own rankings. What goes into just creating something like that?
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of learning. So I work with numbers all day, but not in the sort of the use case of ranking system. So I started this and was like, there's got to be a better way to rank MCLA teams like BYU and UVU, and I didn't really love like the polls, and some people have used RPI. One of my good friends, Jordan Harris, you started kind of creating RPI just to start down this path of like, how could we rank teams? And we got to some conversations about some of the areas where we didn't think it performed great. And so that's kind of what stemmed this research topic, I guess, into like ranking systems and how you could rank teams and how you could rank things using scores versus just who won and lost. And so yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but a lot of it was learning how to make sense of the data and how to make an algorithm that made a ranking system. And then on top of that, learning how to publish that so it runs every night on a computer that I have, and it automatically runs, and then it automatically posts to Twitter every Monday. So learning how to do all that, and it was also some learning experience. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into the background of that. I think is interesting. Most people don't really care.
I think a lot of people are invested in sort of the notion of an RPI and all that, simply because that's what we use to seed our teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of become a hot button issue, and so I guess my next question would be, there probably isn't an ideal way to rank teams unless everyone played each other, which isn't realistic. And so, do you feel like the current RPI system or an RPI, not even necessarily the UHSA one, but do you feel that's a great way to rank teams, or do you think that there's another way that maybe could be proposed?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the RPI in general. I think there's some severe limitations to it. I think it works a little bit better in college basketball, where the mix of who you're playing is a little bit better and they play more games. Another sort of issue that I have is I think we play too many games at the high school level. I think 16 is, as much as D1 plays, and, we don't need to play more games than most D1 plays 12 to 14. I don't think we need to play more than that. And I think if we played less than 16, we'd actually get rid of this home and home schedule that a lot of regions face, but that's probably another topic for another time. But yeah, so I think I have issues with RPI in general. I think it leads to some poor results because of some of the underlying issues of how it's calculated. And then I think just it doesn't really mix well with lacrosse and how lacrosse is played. So yeah, but I do think there are ways to do rankings. I thought Lax Power was better, and the Red Rankings more in line with like Lax Power than it is RPI, although it has pretty big differences from Lax Power as well. But I think those are fine. I think you could come up with a better ranking system, but ultimately, like I'm a big proponent, big fan of like having the regions, like the region winners like make it to the playoffs and have the regions like mean something. And so I would probably lean that way. But if that's not an option, I'd probably go with some other ranking system instead of RPI.
Sure. And you mentioned something that I've kind of touched on a tad in my newsletter, but that's that, the region winner only gets a trophy. And look, maybe that's all they need, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever. But in the sort of old days growing up, obviously, the region winner, or when I played, it was conference. The conference winner would then go play the number 4 seed from a paired conference.
Yeah.
And the irony is, Taylor, is Highland would always get matched up with Timpview, which is sort of ironic. You mentioned something though, like, and I think we may see this year. Obviously, tons of lacrosse left to be played, but Maple Mountain right now is at the top of that region, and they're the number 10 team in the RPI. And so basically, you're going to say, let's assume that Maple Mountain wins the region. Obviously, again, lots of lacrosse left to be played, and I don't necessarily think they're the favorite. I would probably put Wasatch in that boat, but if the playoffs started today, essentially, you would have the region champ from that region. And look, in 5A, there's only 4 regions. You would have that region champ as the number 10 team.
Yeah.
And that's a little hard pill to swallow, I think. And it doesn't necessarily reward region play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, especially if we're doing this home and away sort of, and I don't know what their region, I don't know if they have home and away, but this home and away schedule, like, it's like we're pushing region play, but we're also, I don't know, not rewarding region play. Like, it's like, which one do we really care about? Do we really want us to like focus on the region, or do we really not care about the region? And we're kind of in this like limbo zone. And it's, I think we should, like, are they the 10th best team? I don't know. And I'm not going to like say they are, they should be higher or lower than that. But I do think it's not the worst thing to reward someone who won, the region, especially if they're playing twice, if most of their schedule in the regular season is like about winning that region. So yeah, I agree with that. Like I said, the other issue is I think the RPI is also inherently flawed. And maybe if you use something else besides RPI, maybe they would be rewarded more. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And so, I haven't put a ton of thought into this, but sort of the idea that makes sense to me, and especially in like 5A, when you have an even number of regions, is the top 2 teams from each region, get put into a bucket of 8. And then they're seeded 1 through 8 based on RPI. And I think I'm okay with that. And then teams 9 through the rest are the remaining, right? And so, basically, if you take 3rd in your region, the best you could be is the 9 seed, which I think is fair.
Yeah, especially if everyone makes the playoffs, then I feel like you have to beat everyone. If you want to win a championship, you have to beat everyone anyway. So where you start is not as big of a deal. It would be different if we were saying, hey, we're going to exclude some teams that maybe are better than the 2nd seed of a different region or something. So. And actually, I'm a proponent of, I would love to not have everyone make the playoffs. I think it should be a little bit more of a reward. But if we're in that sort of world of everyone makes the playoffs, then what you just proposed, I think, makes a lot of sense.
And really what you would get, and to your point, you're right. If you want to win the championship, you could be the 20th team or the 1st team. It really doesn't matter. But if you take 1 or 2 in your region and are in that 1 to 8 spot, it means you're getting a home game for the playoffs, which I think is a reward.
Yeah.
For playing well in region. So
yeah. Well, one thing that, like, I mentioned some of the inherent flaws of RPI. The one thing I don't like about, ranking everyone else versus, using the RPI is, like I said, I think it's a sort of a flawed metric. And one of the biggest things that I don't like about it is, I guess 2 things. One, it doesn't really account for score. So, your team could win by 10 or 1, and it's treated the same. And in some ways that's a good thing, but there's also information that's sort of lost there. If you beat a team by 10, I'm very against running up the score, but like, if you beat someone by 10, you're quite a bit better than someone who beat them by 1. That's sort of, if you beat them by 1 in overtime, that's very different than beating someone by 10. And so, RPI doesn't count for that. It also, punishes people who play a weaker schedule. And in our case, a lot of those games are forced because of region play. And I'm not saying people should get rewarded for being 10-0 if they've only played sort of weak teams, but you also shouldn't be punished for being 10-0 if, because you had to play 8 games against weaker teams. And that's kind of the realm that we're in. And then the third one is because we're sort of isolated into regions and there's not a lot of cross playing, you don't really RPI doesn't get a great sense for the best team in region 1, or I shouldn't say region 1 because I don't know about each region, but we'll just say region A could be really weak compared to region B, but because they don't play enough, RPI doesn't really pick that up. So that's why I'm a sort of against RPI and against, I think there's other better metrics out there, what I would love to see is a different, what you described with the region winners, and then except for instead of using RPI, use some other metric. And honestly, if you just did wins and losses, I think that would be as good as RPI. And so, and is it fair? No, but nothing in sports is fair. Tell anyone who will listen that if you're trying to make sports perfectly fair, then you're going to fail every time because it's inherently not fair.
Right. And really the only fair way would be for each team to play each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you would have, 40 games.
Yeah.
So, which obviously isn't ideal or realistic. So Taylor, thanks for coming on to the show. And anything else you want to mention? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think I've probably talked longer than anyone wants to hear. So I think we're good. This has been super fun. And I appreciate you having me out here to ramble on a little bit.
No, that's why we brought you on. And that's the beauty of podcasts is people can tune out whenever they'd like. So, and really there's a lot of people who enjoy long podcasts. And so, this one was great. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to see what Tim View does the rest of the year and best of luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Hey, I appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone in the state for all your hard work. Honestly, you crush it. And it's been awesome to follow you along and Utah lacrosse along, because I think what you're doing is awesome and it brings a lot of people a lot of enjoyment. So thank you for what you do, and I appreciate everything that you do for us and the whole state.
Thanks, Coach. I really appreciate that. As John Oglesby said in my last podcast, it's the people. The games come and go, but it's the people that help. And so if we didn't have a great community, I would have stopped this a long time ago. Is the reality. So
yeah, well, we all appreciate it. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Coach, and we'll see you on the sidelines.
Sounds good. Thanks.